Please don't fire me. And she begged, until the mafia boss said, then marry me. The email was a single, sterile line. Mr. Armano requires your presence in the 40th floor conference room. Immediately. Rachel Wynn's blood ran cold. She was an assistant, nothing more. A ghost in the machine of Armano and Sons Private Holdings, an empire that owned half of Manhattan's skyline and, if the whispers in the hallways were true, most of its shadows, too. Men like Damian Armano did not summon assistants. They existed in penthouse suites and tinted town cars, worlds away from her cubicle and the quiet hum of her adding machine. Her hands trembled as she saved her spreadsheet. It was a mistake. It had to be. Maybe he needed coffee. No. He had an executive assistant for that, a severe woman who looked like she swallowed glass for breakfast. Rachel straightened her gray cardigan, a worn-out comfort against the office's Arctic air conditioning, and made the long walk to the elevator bank. Each silent, ascending floor ratcheted the knot in her stomach tighter. When the doors opened, she wasn't met by Mr. Armano. She was met by Cynthia Davies, the head of Human Resources. Cynthia's smile was thin, painted on, and didn't reach her eyes. Rachel, thank you for coming up, Cynthia said, gesturing to the glass-walled room. Mr. Armano will be with us shortly. Please sit. The room was vast and empty, dominated by a black granite table that reflected the bruised purple of the afternoon sky. Rachel sat, perching on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than her car. Cynthia, I apologize, but could you tell me what this is regarding? Rachel asked, her voice quiet. Cynthia stacked a thin folder on the table. A report was flagged this morning. A significant discrepancy in the third quarter acquisitions ledger. A wire transfer was misallocated. A rather large sum. Rachel's mind raced. The third quarter ledger? I only helped finalize the data entry. The authorization comes from accounting from Mr. Petrov. Mr. Petrov was let go this morning, Cynthia said, her tone flat. And his access logs show the final command for the transfer was routed through your terminal at 2:17 a.m. last Tuesday. Rachel's breath hitched. What? That's impossible. I wasn't even here. I left at 7. The digital footprint is clear, Cynthia said, unmoved by the panic rising in Rachel's eyes. Given the sum and the sensitive nature of the account it was pulled from, the company is treating this as gross negligence. At best, termination is the most likely outcome. Termination? The word echoed in the sterile room. But I didn't do it. I swear I didn't do it. Mr. Armano felt it appropriate to speak with you himself, given your tenure. As if on cue, the heavy glass door swung open. Damian Armano did not enter a room. He consumed it. He was tall, dressed in a custom charcoal suit that seemed molded to his frame, and moved with a silence that was deeply unsettling. He was the youngest son, the one who actually ran the legitimate operations, but he had his father's eyes, dark, assessing, and utterly void of warmth. He took the seat at the head of the table, not looking at Rachel, but at the folder Cynthia had brought. "Leave us," he said. The words were not a request. Cynthia stood, nodded once, and vanished, the door clicking shut with terrifying finality. The silence that followed was worse than any accusation. Damian Armano opened the folder and read, his face impassive. Rachel felt like a specimen under glass. She could feel the tears welling, hot and shameful. This job was her lifeline. It was the only stable thing she had ever known, the one place where her quiet diligence had been enough. "Mr. Armano," she began, her voice cracking. "Please, I don't know what happened. I didn't authorize any transfer. I wouldn't even know how. I just do the data entry. Please, you have to believe me." He slowly lifted his gaze. It was the first time he had ever truly looked at her, and his focus was so intense it felt physical, like a hand pressing against her chest. He said nothing. He just watched her. The tears broke free. They ran down her cheeks, hot and sudden. She hated this. Hated feeling this small, this powerless. "Please don't fire me," she whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush of humiliation and raw fear. "I need this job. I'll do anything. I'll work weekends. I'll take a pay cut. I can't lose this job. Please." She finally broke. dropping her face into her hands, her shoulders shaking with quiet, desperate sobs. He let her cry for nearly a minute. The only sound was the rustle of his suit cuff as he turned a page. When he finally spoke, his voice was unchanged, low, measured, devoid of pity. The wire transfer was for $600,000. It was moved to an unsecured account. It is gone. She looked up, wiping her face. I know, he said. Rachel froze. You know? Petrov was careless. He compromised your terminal, used your login as a scapegoat, and fled the country. We have known this since 9 o'clock this morning. Rachel stared, relief and confusion warring within her. Then why am I here? Why did Cynthia say I was being fired? Because, Damien said, closing the folder. You are. But I'm innocent, she stammered. Innocence is irrelevant, he said, steepling his fingers. Loyalty is what matters. Petrov was a traitor, but the system failed. A vulnerability was exposed, and you, Miss Wynne, were the vulnerability. So I'm being punished for something someone else did? You are being removed because you are a liability, he stated. However, I find myself in a unique position. I am prepared to offer you an alternative to termination. Rachel waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. You will keep your job. In fact, you will be promoted. Your salary will be quadrupled. Your debt will be cleared. He paused, his dark eyes fixed on hers. In exchange, you will marry me. The air left her lungs. Of all the things she had expected, this was not one. She stared at him, searching for the punchline. The cruel twist of a corporate power play, there was none. His expression was one of absolute, terrifying sincerity. That's not funny, she whispered. It was not intended to be. It is a transaction, a contract. You are precisely what I require. Require for what? A wife? I require loyalty. Miss Wynne, I require secrecy. I require someone who understands what it is to have nothing, and who will be grateful for everything. You have been loyal to this company. You are diligent. You are quiet. And, as of this moment, you are desperate. He leaned forward, dropping his voice. I'm offering you a way out. Not just from termination. I am offering you protection, wealth, safety, in exchange. You will be my wife, in name and in public. You will ask no questions of my business, and you will report to me anything you see or hear that seems out of place. It is a simple arrangement. You want to marry me to protect me. From what? A shadow passed over his features. So quick she almost missed it. From the world, Rachel, from men like Petrov, from vulnerability, from everything that is coming. She felt dizzy. This is insane. This is a test, isn't it? He stood, towering over her. This is an offer. You have 48 hours to decide. If you decline, your termination will be processed by morning. If you accept, a car will be sent for you tomorrow evening. Do not speak of this to anyone. Either way, your problem with the missing money is gone. He walked to the door and held it open, numb. Rachel stood and walked past him, careful not to let her sleeve brush his suit. She didn't breathe again until the elevator doors closed, and then it was a ragged, painful gasp. The subway ride home was a blur. She walked the 3 blocks from the station in a daze, her mind replaying his words, "Marry me." It was a joke, a cruel, sick joke, played by a bored billionaire. She climbed the 4 flights to her tiny, walk-up apartment, the smell of stale cooking oil and damp plaster clinging to the stairwell. She fumbled for her keys, her fingers still shaking, and then she saw it, taped to her door. Flapping in the draft was a bright, fluorescent orange piece of paper, a 5-day eviction notice. Her stomach bottomed out. She ripped it from the wood, her eyes scanning the black print. Failure to remit payment, balance past due, vacate the premises. She had been scraping by, robbing Peter to pay Paul, but a medical bill from 2 months ago had finally done it. She was late, too late. She unlocked the door and stumbled inside. The apartment was small, but it was hers. It was the only safe place she had ever built. She sank onto her second-hand sofa, the springs groaning in protest, and the full weight of her life came crashing down. The eviction notice, the termination, the desperation. She thought of Mark, her ex, the one who had told her she was too quiet, too mousy, that she'd never amount to anything without him, the one who had emptied their joint savings account before disappearing, leaving her with a mountain of debt and a hollowed-out feeling of worthlessness. She thought of her childhood, passed between foster homes, a history of abandonment that had taught her one brutal lesson. You are always, always on your own. Losing this job wasn't just losing a paycheck. It was losing the last fragile foothold she had. It was failure. It was homelessness. It was the confirmation of every terrible thing Mark had ever said about her. Damien Armano's words returned. I am offering you protection, safety. It wasn't a joke. It was a lifeline. A cold, heavy, terrifying lifeline. He was right. She was desperate. She didn't sleep. She sat on her sofa all night, the orange paper clutched in her hand, watching the city lights flicker outside her dirty window. She weighed the two options. One was certain ruin. The other was an abyss. At precisely 6 p.m. the next day, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. A town car is waiting for you downstairs. Miss Wynne. The voice was curt, professional. It wasn't a question. She looked at herself in the cracked bathroom mirror. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. She was wearing the same clothes she'd worn to the office. She looked beaten. She was beaten. I'll be right down, she whispered. She grabbed her purse, didn't bother with a coat, and walked out of her apartment, not looking back. The car was black, silent and obscenely luxurious. It ferried her through Manhattan, not to an office, but to a towering residential skyscraper in Tribeca. A private elevator opened directly into his penthouse. It was less a home than a fortress of glass and steel. The view was breathtaking. The city lights scattered like diamonds below them. Damien was there, standing by the window, a glass of water in his hand. 2 other men were with him, dressed in severe black suits. One was clearly a lawyer, the other had the rigid posture of an officiant. Rachel, Damien said. He didn't use her last name. You came. You knew I would, she said, her voice hollow. I knew you were a pragmatist. The lawyer stepped forward, briefcase clicking open on a massive marble table. Miss Wynne, if you'll review the agreement, it wasn't a marriage certificate. It was a prenuptial contract. It was thick. It outlined her duties, public appearances as required, absolute discretion, non-disclosure. It outlined her compensation, a monthly stipend that made her eyes water, full access to his accounts for household needs, and a one-time, non-negotiable settlement of $5 million, to be paid upon his death or an amicable dissolution after 5 years, and a clause. Any breach of loyalty or confidentiality will result in the immediate termination of the agreement and the forfeiture of all compensation. It is simple, Damien said, noticing her hesitation. You are mine, in public. I am yours. What happens in private is our arrangement, but the loyalty is absolute. She picked up the heavy gold pen. She thought of the orange eviction notice. She thought of the empty, gnawing fear that had been her only companion for years. She signed Rachel Wynne for the last time. The officiant stepped up. The ceremony took less than 3 minutes. There were no rings, no vows of love, just a legal recitation, a few I do's that sounded more like confessions. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I pronounce you husband and wife. The officiant looked deeply uncomfortable. He and the lawyer packed their briefcases and were gone seconds later, leaving Rachel alone in the massive, silent penthouse with her new husband. The silence stretched, thick and charged. My staff have cleared your apartment, Damien said finally, walking toward a hallway. Your belongings will be here by morning, though I suggest you purchase a new wardrobe. A car will be available to you tomorrow. He stopped at a set of double doors. This is my suite. Your room is down the hall, the guest suite. It has its own bath. You will be comfortable there. He was dismissing her, like an employee, like a transaction that was complete, something inside her, something that had been dormant for years. Finally snapped. It wasn't anger. It was a cold, hard need to understand the cage she had just willingly walked into. "No," she said. He turned. One eyebrow raised slightly. It was the most expression she had ever seen on him. "You bought a wife, Mr. Armano," she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "You bought my loyalty. You didn't just hire me for a new position. I'm not going to be the help, hiding in a guest room. I need to know what is expected of me. I need to know the rules." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze traveling from her frightened eyes to her clenched fists. He walked back toward her, slowly, deliberately. He was a predator, and she had just bared her throat. But she didn't back down. He stopped just inches from her. He was so much taller than she'd realized. He smelled of expensive soap and something metallic, like cold air. "You're right," he murmured. His voice was different now. Softer, rougher. "It's not a guest suite. It's your suite." "What do you want from me?" she whispered, hating the tremor in her voice. He lifted a hand. She flinched, a gut reaction from a life with Mark. Damien's hand stopped, hovering in the air between them. He waited until her breathing steadied, then very, very slowly, he continued his motion. His fingers, warm and calloused, brushed the stray strands of mousy brown hair from her cheek. His thumb grazed the sensitive skin under her eye, wiping away a tear she hadn't known was falling. The touch was feather-light, yet it branded her. "I want you to be seen with me. I want you to be loyal, and I want you to be safe." He dropped his hand, but his eyes held hers. "You are not just useful, Rachel. You are not a liability, not anymore." He turned and walked into his bedroom, leaving the door open. An invitation, a command. She didn't know which. She stood frozen for a full minute, the phantom touch of his thumb still burning on her skin. She was exhausted, the fear, the adrenaline, the shock. It all crashed down on her at once. She was too tired to go to the guest room, too tired to fight, too tired to even change. She walked into his room. It was dark, dominated by a bed that seemed impossibly large. He was on the far side, already under the covers, dressed in a black t-shirt, reading a file. He didn't look up. Rachel walked to the other side of the bed, her shoes sinking into the thick carpet. She kicked off her sensible flats. She was still wearing her work blouse and slacks, the armor of a life that was now over. She lay down on top of the heavy silk comforter, her back to him, facing the wall of windows. She curled into a tight ball, every muscle aching. She was Mrs. Damien Armano. She was safe. She had never felt so terrified in her entire life. She closed her eyes, and the emotional exhaustion claimed her instantly, pulling her down into a deep, dreamless dark. The first thing Rachel registered was the light. It was not the gray, watery light that filtered through her apartment's grimy window. This was bright, clean morning sun, pouring through glass that spanned from floor to ceiling. The second thing she registered was the fabric. She was not wearing her polyester work slacks and cardigan. She was under a comforter so heavy it felt like a physical weight, and against her skin was the slick, cool kiss of heavy silk. She sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. She was in a pair of simple, black silk pajamas. The top was long-sleeved, the bottoms loose, but they were not hers. Her heart hammered. She looked wildly around the enormous, empty room. Damien's side of the bed was pristine, the pillows uncreased, as if he had never been there at all. She had no memory of changing. The humiliation was a hot flush that raced up her neck. Had a stranger, a housekeeper, undressed her? The thought of his cold, assessing eyes on her while she was unconscious was somehow worse. She felt marked, owned, like a piece of furniture he had reabhorred to better suit the room. Her work clothes were gone. On the black marble dresser across the room, a single, heavy cream-colored envelope rested. Her name, Rachel, was written on it in sharp, black ink. Inside was a thick card, not a note. "A car will be ready at 7 this evening. My tailor has provided options for you in the closet. Wear the blue one. Be ready by 10 o'clock this morning for fittings." It was not a request. It was a schedule. She found the closet. It was a room, larger than her entire kitchen. Racks of clothes, gowns, suits, blouses, shoes, all in her size. It was an invasion. He had known her measurements. He had known her shoe size. Her blood ran cold again. Realizing the vulnerability he mentioned had not just been her work terminal, he had known everything. At precisely 10 o'clock, a severe-looking woman with a measuring tape arrived. Rachel stood, mute, as she was measured, poked and prodded for 2 hours. Racks of clothes were wheeled in and out. By the time the woman left, Rachel was exhausted and felt less human than ever. The day passed in a silent, luxurious haze. She was a prisoner in a skyline fortress. She tried to read the books on his shelves, first editions, leather-bound, but the words blurred. At 6, she showered in a bathroom carved from gray marble, the water pressure so strong it almost hurt. She found the dress he had specified. It was laid out on the bed. It was not blue. It was the color of a deep sapphire, a heavy satin that draped and pooled. When she put it on, she stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror was a stranger. The dress was modest by wealthy standards, long sleeves, a high neck, but it was cut with such precision that it clung to her waist and hips, hinting at a body she had spent her life hiding under cardigans. Her mousy brown hair, now clean and dried, looked richer. Her eyes, wide with fear, looked enormous. She looked elegant, and she looked terrified. When the elevator doors opened at 7, Damien was waiting inside, dressed in a tuxedo that made him look less like a guest and more like the owner of the night. He looked her up and down, a slow, appraising gaze that missed nothing. "Good," was all he said. The car ride was silent. His presence next to her was suffocating. He didn't touch her, but his knee was only an inch from hers. She could feel the heat radiating off him. The gala was a roar of noise, light, and money. It was at a museum. The lobby transformed into a forest of white flowers and glittering lights. Photographers shouted. People waved. Damien's hand settled on the small of her back. It was not a caress. It was a brand. He steered her through the crowd, his touch firm, proprietary. Every person they passed, every whispered greeting. Damien's grip seemed to tighten, holding her closer to his side. He was a shark moving through water. And she was the pilot fish clamped to his fin. "Damien, good to see you," a senator boomed, shaking his hand. "Senator, my wife, Rachel." The word wife hit her like a physical blow every time he said it. She smiled, nodded, shook hands, and felt like a doll. He was fiercely protective, not of her, but of the image. When a photographer tried to get a shot of her alone, Damien simply stepped in front of her, blocking the lens with his body until the man moved on. She was desperate for a breath of air, overwhelmed by the perfume and the noise, while Damien was trapped in a conversation with an older woman dripping in diamonds. Rachel slipped away, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing tray. She found a small alcove near an exhibit of Roman statues, the marble cool and silent. "I was wondering when he'd let you off the leash." The voice was smooth, laced with an accent she couldn't place. She turned. A man was leaning against a pillar, handsome in a way that was all sharp angles and predatory confidence. He had dark, slicked-back hair and eyes so dark they were almost black. He was smiling, but it was all teeth. "I'm sorry," Rachel said, clutching her glass. "Luca Moretti," he said, pushing off the pillar and offering a hand. He didn't wait for her to take it, instead lifting her own hand and brushing his lips against her knuckles. His skin was cold. "And you are the mysterious Rachel. The assistant. He pulled you right out of the gutter, didn't he?" Rachel snatched her hand back. "I don't know who you are." "I'm the competition," Luca said, his smile widening. He stepped closer, invading her space. "You're much prettier than the usual Armano acquisitions. Tell me, does he let you talk, or just sit there and look grateful?" He reached out, his finger tracing the high neckline of her dress. "He always did like his toys pristine." Rachel recoiled, slapping his hand away. "Don't touch me. Feisty, I like that. That's enough. Luca." Damien's voice cut through the air like a razor. The temperature in the alcove dropped 20 degrees. Luca Moretti didn't flinch, but his smile tightened. Damien was there, standing directly behind Rachel. He didn't look at Luca. He looked at her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. She could only nod, her throat tight. Damien's hand returned to her back, but this time it was different. He slid his arm completely around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. It was an act of pure, unconcealed possession. Only then did he turn his gaze to the other man. "She's not for you, Moretti. She's not for anyone. You will not look at her again. You will not speak to her again. Am I clear? It's a free country. Armano," Lucas sneered. "Not for you," Damien replied, his voice a flat promise of violence. "Not anymore. Enjoy the party." He turned Rachel and propelled her out of the alcove, his grip so tight it almost hurt. He didn't stop until they were at the coat check. "We're leaving." In the car. The silence was a roaring beast. Rachel stared out the window, her reflection a pale ghost against the glittering city lights. "Never speak to him again," Damien said, his voice tight with a rage she hadn't heard before. "If he approaches you, you walk away. If you cannot walk away, you scream. Do you understand me? Who is he? He is a snake, and he is not your concern." He looked at her, his jaw rigid. "Your only concern is doing exactly as I say." When they returned to the penthouse, the oppressive silence was almost a relief. Damien immediately loosened his bow tie, his shoulders rigid. He was still vibrating with that contained fury. "I have to make a call," he said, stalking toward his office. Rachel was left standing in the vast living room, the sapphire dress suddenly feeling like a costume. The adrenaline from the gala and the encounter with Luca began to fade, replaced by a cold, familiar dread. Damien's voice was audible from the office, low and sharp. He wasn't speaking English, it sounded like Italian, and it was angry. She kicked off the agonizingly high heels and wandered. The apartment was silent, sterile. It was a showcase, not a home. She was restless, trapped. She found the kitchen, a gleaming expanse of stainless steel she was afraid to touch. She found a media room, a gym. Then she found the laundry room. It was down a hall, past the kitchen, clearly staff quarters. Her own belongings, the few boxes her landlord hadn't seized, were stacked against one wall. A large, commercial-grade washer and dryer stood silent. A wicker laundry hamper sat beside the washing machine. It was full. She didn't know why she looked. Maybe she was just looking for a sign of humanity, a stain, a wrinkle, something that wasn't perfect. She pulled back a few towels. Underneath was a white dress shirt. It was crumpled and stiff, and it was soaked in blood. Rachel jerked her hand back as if she'd been burned. It wasn't a splash. It wasn't a nosebleed. The entire right side of the shirt, from the ribs down, was a dark, dried, rust-colored map of violence. She could smell the iron tang of it even from a foot away. She stared, her mind struggling to connect the man in the tuxedo, the senator's friend, the civilized gala. With this was the truth. This was the reality beneath the silk pajamas and the sapphire dress. This was the world she had married into. This was the protection he had offered. She heard the elevator chime. She jumped, shoving the towels back over the shirt, her heart pounding a sick rhythm against her ribs. She backed out of the laundry room just as Damien strode into the living room, shrugging on a long black coat. The anger was gone, replaced by a chilling, absolute focus. "There's been a breach at one of the warehouses," he said, not looking at her. He was checking a pocket, his movements economical and precise. "I have to go out." "A breach?" she asked, her voice sounding thin. "Business." He finally looked at her. His eyes were flat, the pupils dilated. "Do not leave the penthouse. Bolt the door behind me." And then he was gone. The heavy thud of the bolt sliding into place echoed in the silence. Rachel didn't sleep. She couldn't. She changed out of the gown, scrubbing her face clean of the makeup. She put on the silk pajamas again, feeling the cold weight of the blood-stained shirt in her memory. She sat on the sofa, watching the city lights. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, at 3 in the morning. The elevator chimed. She stood up just as the doors opened. Damien stumbled out. The controlled, powerful man was gone. He was leaning against the wall for support, his coat gone, his tuxedo shirt ripped open at the collar. His knuckles were raw and bleeding. A deep, dark stain was spreading across his left side, just over his ribs. He saw her and froze. His face was pale, slick with sweat and exhaustion. "Rachel, go to bed." His voice was a raw rasp. She ignored him. In that moment, he wasn't a monster. He was just a man, bleeding in his living room. She moved toward him, her bare feet silent on the marble. "You're hurt. I'm fine," he growled. Pushing off the wall and trying to walk, he winced, a sharp intake of breath, and his hand flew to his side. "You are not," she said. The fear was still there, but a strange, practical calm settled over her. "Sit down. Where is the first aid kit?" "In the master bath. It doesn't matter." She ran. The kit was under the sink, a professional-grade trauma bag. When she returned, he was slumped on the leather sofa, his head back, eyes closed. His breathing was shallow. "Let me see," she commanded, her voice surprisingly steady. He opened his eyes, looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. The unreadable, terrifying mask was gone. In its place was just bone-deep exhaustion and pain. He didn't argue. She knelt in front of him. "You have to take the shirt off." He fumbled with the buttons, his fingers clumsy. She brushed his hands away. "Let me—" Her fingers trembled, but she undid the studs, pushing the ruined fabric apart. It was a long, deep gash, angry and red, oozing blood, It looked like a knife wound. It wasn't deep enough to kill, but it was bad. She grabbed a clean cloth from the kitchen and a bowl of water. She came back and knelt, dipping the cloth in the cool water. "This will be cold," she whispered. She pressed the cloth gently to his side to clean the wound. He hissed, his entire body tensing, but he didn't pull away. He just watched her. His gaze was heavy, unguarded, and so intense it made her skin burn. She worked in silence, cleaning the blood, applying antiseptic, her movements careful. He watched her face, her brow furrowed in concentration, her hands, which were so gentle. She finished taping the bandage, her hands lingering on his skin. His chest was warm, his muscles tight beneath her palms. The silence in the room was electric. She looked up, meeting his dark, vulnerable gaze. The question was out of her mouth before she could stop it. A quiet, terrified whisper. "Do you kill people?" His expression didn't change. He didn't lie. He didn't deflect. He just held her gaze, the truth passing between them, cold and absolute. "Only the ones who come after what's mine." His answer hung in the air. It was a confession and a threat, and in the most terrifying way. It was a promise. She was his. She should have been horrified. She should have run. Instead, she felt a strange pulling sensation, a dark gravity. He was a monster, but he was her monster. Her hand, still resting on his chest, trembled. Slowly, uncertainly, she leaned in. She rose up on her knees, her eyes fixed on his mouth. She was an inch away, her breath ghosting across his lips, and she kissed him. It was soft, barely a touch. A press of her trembling lips against his. It was hesitant, fearful, and questioning. For a second, he remained perfectly still. Then, a low sound rumbled in his chest, and his hand came up, sinking into her hair, cupping the back of her head. He didn't pull her closer, he simply held her there, and he deepened the kiss. It was not the kiss of a gentle man. It was slow, full of a darkness she had only glimpsed. It was reverent. He tasted of whiskey, pain, and iron. He took the kiss he wanted, drawing the breath from her lungs, owning her mouth as completely as he owned everything else. A tremor ran through her. This was real. This was happening. Then, just as a strange, forbidden heat began to curl low in her stomach, he pulled back. His forehead rested against hers. His breathing was ragged, his eyes closed. His hand was still tangled in her hair, his grip tight. "Not yet," he murmured, his voice tight, strained with a control that seemed to cost him everything. "Not like this." He let her go. Rachel sank back on her heels, her lips tingling, her entire body shaking. He watched her, the mask sliding back into place, the vulnerability vanishing. But the exhaustion and the truth remained. The aftermath of the storm was a strange, fragile peace. The morning after. Rachel woke wrapped so tightly in Damien's arms that she could barely move. He was still asleep, his breathing deep, the harsh lines of his face softened. The man who held her looked nothing like the monster who had roared at his men. This man, she realized with a jolt, was the one she was falling for. Their morning routine changed. The silence was still there, but it was no longer empty. It was charged, full of the memory of his touch, of his whispered, "I've got you." He came in at 6:30, as always. But this time, as she passed him his plate of eggs, his hand covered hers, his thumb rubbing a slow circle on her skin. He didn't let go. He just held her hand on the counter while he ate with the other. "Tonight," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We are having dinner at my father's estate." Rachel's blood chilled. The gala had been public. This was private. This was the family. "Do they know about me?" "They know I am married," he said, his gaze fixed on her. "Tonight, they will meet my wife." She felt the old panic rising. "What do I wear? What do I say?" He stood, pulling her gently from her stool. He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "You will wear the red dress, the one with the high neck, and you will say nothing you do not wish to. You are with me." He kissed her. A slow, possessive kiss that tasted of coffee and absolute control. "I will not let them harm you." The Armano estate was not a house. It was a fortress of old money, a sprawling stone mansion in Westchester that loomed against the twilight sky. The penthouse was modern, cold steel. This was ancient, dark wood, and filled with the ghosts of men who had built an empire. Rachel felt like an imposter. Her red dress, a scream of color in the muted, oppressive halls. Damien's hand was a permanent, hot brand on the small of her back. They entered a vast dining room, dominated by a table set for 8. At its head sat a woman in black lace, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant knot, her eyes, as dark and assessing as Damien's, swept over Rachel. This was Isabella Armano, the matriarch. She did not smile. "Damien, you are late," the woman said, her voice accented and sharp. "Madre, you remember Rachel?" It was a statement, not a question. He had clearly shown her a picture. "The assistant," Isabella said, her gaze dismissive. "Sit." Rachel was seated between Damien and his older brother, Vincent. Vincent looked like a coarser, heavier version of Damien. He had the same dark hair, but his eyes held a restless, resentful energy. He smelled of cigars and expensive whiskey. Dinner was a trial. The conversation was entirely in Italian, a rapid, cutting language that left Rachel completely isolated. Damien was the only one who spoke to her, leaning in to murmur quiet translations. But it was clear she was not part of this. She was a curiosity. Then, Vincent turned to her, a predatory smile on his face. "So, Rachel," he said, his English perfect. "Damien has been terribly secretive. You worked at the company. I hear, in the administrative pool?" "I was an assistant, yes," Rachel said, her voice quiet. "An assistant." Vincent swirled the wine in his glass, looking at her over the rim. My, quite the promotion from data entry to this." He gestured at the opulent room. "It is a curious match." "Vincent," Damien warned, his voice a low growl. "No, I am fascinated," Vincent continued, ignoring his brother. "You have no family. I am told. No connections. A ghost. It makes one wonder." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Is she a pawn? Little brother? Someone to keep you occupied? Or is she, perhaps, a threat? A little bird sent by our enemies to find a way inside your nest?" The table went silent. Rachel's face burned. She felt the blood drain from her head, leaving her lightheaded with humiliation. She was being dissected like a lab rat. Before she could speak, a sharp click echoed on the table. Damien had set his silver fork and knife down, perfectly aligned. He didn't look at his brother. He didn't look at his mother. He looked at Rachel, and his dark eyes were blazing with a loyalty so fierce it stunned her. He reached over and put his hand over hers on the table. "She is not a pawn," he said, his voice dangerously calm. He turned his gaze to Vincent, and the temperature in the room plummeted. "She is not a threat. She is my wife." He stood, pulling a stunned Rachel to her feet, his chair scraped back. "And," he added, his voice ringing with absolute finality, "as of this moment, Rachel is the only person in this room I trust." He didn't wait for a reply. He simply took her hand and walked her out of the dining room, leaving his entire family sitting in a stunned, heavy silence. The drive back to the penthouse was silent, but it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the charged tension of their early days. It was a shield. She was inside his shield. He hadn't just offended her. He had chosen her over them. He had declared her his only ally. When the elevator doors opened to the penthouse, he finally let go of her hand. He walked to the bar, his shoulders rigid. "Damien," she said, her voice trembling. He turned, his face tight. "He had no right. What you said—" "Did you mean it?" she whispered. "That I'm the only one you trust?" He walked to her, his expression unreadable. "I do not say things I do not mean. Rachel. Ever." He put his hand on her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. "Go to bed. I have work to do." He was shutting her out, but the wall was different now. It was to protect her, not to hide from her. Later that night, she woke to an empty bed. The space beside her was cold. She sat up, her heart pounding a slow, anxious rhythm. She heard it, his voice. It was coming from his office, a low, angry murmur. She slid out of bed, pulling on one of his shirts, the cotton soft against her skin. She padded barefoot across the cold marble floor. The office door was cracked open. He was speaking in English, his voice sharp with a stress she had never heard. "I don't know who it is," he was saying, "but the leak is coming from inside my own circle. Vincent is making moves. I know it, but this is too smart for him. Someone is feeding him. Someone close to me." A pause. "No, she's not to be touched. She is separate. That is the entire point. They are watching her. I know, I feel it." Another, longer pause. "Then find him. Find the traitor. Because if he gets to her, I will hold you personally responsible." He hung up. Rachel shrank back into the shadows. He wasn't just being hunted, he was being betrayed. His fierce defense of her at dinner. It wasn't just for her benefit, it was a warning to his family. "She is mine. I am surrounded by vipers, but she is the one thing I trust." A wave of fierce, desperate protectiveness washed over her. He was not a monster. He was a man fighting a war on all sides, and she was his only safe harbor. The next morning, she was quiet, watching him as he drank his coffee. She felt like his partner now, not his pet. "Damien," she said, her voice hesitant. He looked up, his eyes sharp. "What is it? I might know something. It's probably nothing." "Tell me. It's your driver. Leo, the one who took me to the bookstore the first time. When I saw that man—" His eyes narrowed. "Leo has been with my father for 20 years. I know, but when I got out of the car, I looked back. He was on his phone. He was kind of hunched over, like he didn't want to be seen. And when he saw me watching him, he ended the call. Fast. He looked guilty." Damien's face went cold, the intimacy of the last few days evaporating like mist. "Leo is my most trusted man. I'm just telling you what I saw," she insisted, her voice rising. "It felt wrong. You said you were being betrayed by someone close to you. He's close to me. He's the one who drives me." He stood up, bashing his chair, scraping loudly. "Rachel, stop. This is not your concern. Your job is to be safe. My job is to handle my business. You are not to involve yourself. You are not to question my men. I need you to trust me. Do you understand?" He didn't wait for an answer. He grabbed his jacket and left. She stood in the kitchen, feeling stupid and small. He had put her back in her box, the wife. The one to be protected, not the one to be trusted with real information. The tension was back, a cold wall between them. She had to get out. She had to breathe. She called for a car. She was going to a different bookstore, a small, independent one in the village. She was going to feel normal for an hour, even if she had to do it with 4 shadows. The 4-man detail was oppressive. 2 walked 20 paces behind her. 2 stayed in the black SUV idling at the curb. She hated it. She felt like a marked woman. She was in the biography aisle, her fingers trailing over the spines. When a voice spoke from behind her, You should be more careful. He has ears everywhere." She spun around. Luca Moretti. His smile was a predatory slash. "He can't protect you in here, can he?" "Where are my men?" she demanded, her voice shaking as she backed away. "Distracted," Luca said, stepping into the aisle, blocking her escape. He looked casual, but his eyes were black and dead. "A small fender bender. They are occupied." He advanced on her. "You still don't get it, do you, Piccola? You think you're in a fairy tale. You married a killer. He's not a businessman. He's a butcher. Get away from me." "He doesn't love you," Luca hissed, his smile fading. "He is incapable of it. You are a shield. You are a toy. And you are, as of this moment, the perfect bait. He's being hunted, by his own, and you're the prize." He was too close. She could smell his cologne, a sweet, cloying scent. He reached out and grabbed her wrist, his grip like a steel trap. "Let go." "Tell me," he whispered. "Does he kiss you with the same mouth he gives orders to kill? Does he touch you with the same hands he uses to—" She slapped him. The sound was a sharp crack in the silent bookstore. His head snapped to the side. His eyes, when they turned back to her, were murderous. She didn't wait. She shoved him hard against the bookshelf, and she ran, screaming. "Help! Fire!" She burst onto the sidewalk. Her 2 security men were there, their faces panicked, running toward her. She pointed back inside. "He's in there! Luca Moretti!" They drew their weapons and plunged inside. Leo pulled the car to the curb, his face pale. "Get in, Mrs. Armano, now!" Rachel didn't stop to think. She jumped in. When she got back to the penthouse, Damien was there. He was standing in the middle of the living room, his phone in his hand, his face a mask of white-hot rage. "What happened?" She told him. Her voice shook, but not with fear. With a cold, primal fury. She told him what Luca had said, that he had grabbed her, that she had slapped him. Damien didn't speak. He simply turned, and with a roar of pure, animalistic rage, he swept a priceless ancient vase from its pedestal. It exploded against the marble floor. "He touched you!" Damien breathed, his chest heaving. He wasn't looking at her. He was pacing. His hands clenched into fists. He stabbed a number on his phone. "Where is he?" he roared at the person on the other end. "I gave you one job, to keep her safe. He was alone with her for 2 minutes. 2 minutes. You are all dead. Find Moretti. Find him, or do not bother coming back. I want his head. I want his hands." He hung up, his breathing ragged. The room was silent, save for his harsh breaths. He turned and saw her, standing by the window, trembling. The rage in his face collapsed, replaced by a raw, agonizing fear. "Rachel!" He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, crushing her so tightly she could barely breathe. He buried his face in her hair. "He put his hands on you," he whispered, his voice broken. "I will kill him. I will kill him for looking at you. If anything had happened to you, if he had taken you, I would burn this city to the ground. There is no place he could hide." He wasn't bragging. It was a blood vow. She held on to him, her own fear melting away, replaced by the stunning, terrifying certainty of his love. "I'm okay, Damien," she whispered, her hands fisted in his shirt. "I'm here. I'm safe." That night, he wouldn't let her go. He was haunted. He followed her, his touch a constant reassurance. In the bedroom, he didn't kiss her mouth. He sat on the bed and pulled her down. Gently lifting her hand, he kissed her wrist, where Luca's fingers had been. He kissed her palm. He was erasing the man, claiming her all over again. He pushed her hair back, his hands shaking slightly as he held her face. "You are my salvation, Rachel," he whispered, his forehead pressing against hers. "You are the only clean thing in my whole life, my only good thing." He kissed her, and it was not the slow, comforting passion of the storm. It was desperate. It was a starving man's kiss. It was a raw, protective, frantic claim. He held her face, kissed her mouth, her eyes, her throat, as if memorizing her. He laid her back, his lips moving to her shoulders, whispering her name over and over, a prayer, a promise. He was anchoring himself to her, the only solid ground in his collapsing world. She believed him. In that moment, she believed everything. The next morning, she woke up, and the doubt was gone. He loved her. This violent, broken, dangerous man loved her, and she loved him. He was in a meeting, one that had been called suddenly. He was in his office. The door closed. She was restless, filled with this new, buoyant certainty. She wandered the apartment, finally feeling like it was her home. She found herself in his office. He had forgotten to lock it. She was just going to wait for him. Maybe read one of his leather-bound books. She sat in his chair. It still felt too big. She saw the safe, built into the wall behind his desk. It was open, just a crack, but not locked. He must have been in a hurry, distracted by the call. Trust me. He had said that he had shut her out. She knew she shouldn't. It was his. It was private, but she wasn't a liability. She was his wife, his partner. She just wanted to understand. Her fingers trembled. She pulled the heavy steel door open. Inside were stacks of cash, a weapon, and several thick file folders. One had her name on it, Rachel Wynn. It was her employment file. She assumed. She smiled, a little curious. She lifted it out. It was heavy. She opened it, and the world stopped. It was not an employment file. It was a surveillance file. Photographs, dozens of them. It was her, walking out of her old apartment, her keys in her hand. It was her, on the subway, her head leaning against the glass. Asleep. It was her, sitting on a park bench, eating a sandwich, alone, it in her, in the rain, crying after a fight with Mark. She fumbled through them, her hands shaking so hard she dropped half. She looked at the timestamp on the back of 1 year, 4 months, and 12 days ago, long before the accounting error, long before she had ever met Damian Armano. He hadn't found her in his office. He had hunted her. The promotion, the marriage, the protection, it wasn't a solution. It was an acquisition. The love she had felt, the certainty, the safety, it all shattered, curdling into a betrayal so cold and so absolute it stopped her breath. She was not his salvation. She was his obsession. She had not been rescued. She had been captured. The silence that met him was not the warm, sleepy silence of the morning. It was a cold, brittle silence, like a sheet of ice about to crack. Damian walked out of his office, rolling his shoulders, the tension of the meeting still clinging to him. Rachel? She was standing in his office, by the open safe. His blood ran cold. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. She was holding a photograph, the one of her on the subway, asleep, her head against the glass. The file was splayed at her feet, a fan of her own life, a life she thought had been private. "Who am I to you, Damian?" she asked, her voice unearthly calm. It was the calm of pure, absolute shock. He had rehearsed this. He had run this scenario in his head 1,000 times. He had known, from the moment he proposed, that this day might come. All his plans, all his carefully constructed answers, evaporated. He was left with only the truth. "You're my wife," he said, his voice rough. "Before that," she held up the picture. 1 year, 4 months, and 12 days ago, I was on the F train. I was coming home from a double shift. I was nobody." She looked at him, and her eyes, the eyes he had memorized, were dead. "But I wasn't nobody to you, was I?" "No," he said. He closed his eyes for a brief second, a flicker of profound, agonizing regret. "You weren't. You hunted me." The words were an accusation, whispered but landing with the force of a physical blow. This entire time, the job, the firing, the rescue. She laughed, a short, bitter, terrifying sound. "It was all a lie. You didn't save me from a vulnerability. You created it. It didn't start like that," he said. Taking a step toward her, she flinched, and he froze. That single, tiny movement broke him more than any bullet ever could. Don't you dare come near me." She backed away, her hands held up. "It was raining," he said, his voice low, desperate. "On a Tuesday. You were in the West Village. I was in a car, waiting for a meeting. There was a mugging. A man grabbed a woman's purse. He knocked her down. He knocked her child down." He watched her face. She was remembering. "No one helped," he continued. "They just walked by. But you You had nothing. You were wearing shoes with holes in them. You ran at him. You screamed. You threw your coffee at his face. You didn't even have a phone. You just acted. She whispered, confused. He ran. You helped the woman up. She was crying. Her child, my cousin's child, was terrified. And you sat on the wet pavement and you calmed him down. You gave the woman your umbrella, your only umbrella, and you walked away in the rain. He took another careful step. I had to know who you were. I had my men find you. It was just to see who you were. An assistant, struggling, alone, buried in debt. But you were honest. You were the only honest person I had ever met. So you watched me. The realization was dawning, cold and horrific. I watched you, he confessed, his voice raw. At first, it was just admiration. Then, I saw how you lived, how Mark treated you, how the world overlooked you, and admiration became an obsession. It became this. He gestured to the room, to their life. I couldn't just offer you money. You would have said no. I couldn't just offer you a job. You would have been a target. I had to bring you into my world. The only way I could protect you was to own you, to make you mine. The firing was a lie. The marriage was my only way. Your only way to get me, she spat, the ice cracking, revealing the white-hot rage beneath. You didn't protect me. You curated me. You put me in a cage you built, the panic attack, the storm, our night. Her voice broke, and a sob of pure, unadulterated betrayal tore from her chest. Was that real, or was it just the next step in your plan? It was real, he said, and the force of his words shook the room. Rachel, all of it, my feelings, they are the only real thing I have. The method was a lie, but the love is not. I love you. Love? She threw the photographs at him. They scattered across his suit, landing at his feet. You don't know what that word means. You know obsession. You know possession. You know control. But you do not know love. The man I thought he doesn't exist. He's just a shadow you created. She walked past him. He grabbed her arm. Rachel, please, don't. She looked at his hand on her arm, then back at his face. Her expression one of utter revulsion. Let go of me, or I swear to God, I will scream. I will scream until your family, your enemies, and the entire city knows what you are. He let her go as if she had burned him. She grabbed her purse and her keys. She didn't take the coat he had bought her. She didn't take the phone. She walked to the elevator and jabbed the button. You won't last a day out there, he said, his voice hollow. You are my wife. You are mine. They will find you. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside and turned to him, her face a mask of cold and devastating resolve. I would rather be found by them, she said, than be owned by you. The doors slid shut. She walked out onto the street, into the noise and the grime. She hailed a cab. The freedom was so abrupt, so total, it made her dizzy. She had a few $100s in her purse. She told the driver to take her to Queens. She found a motel, the kind that rented by the hour. The carpet sticky, the air thick with the smell of bleach and old cigarettes. She paid for 3 nights in cash. She locked the deadbolt, the chain, and the extra lock she had bought at a bodega. She sat on the lumpy bed, and the silence was deafening. There was no hum of a high-tech air filter, just the sound of traffic and a couple arguing in the next room. Her phone, the one in her purse, began to ring. Damien. She stared at it. It rang and rang. Damien, Damien, unknown, Damien. She powered it off and threw it in the drawer. The next morning, she went out. She bought a cheap burner phone and a set of clothes from a thrift store. Jeans, a faded sweatshirt. She looked like herself again. The ghost. She went to a temp agency. The woman at the desk smiled. Rachel Wynn. Yes, let's see what we have. Her fingers clattered on the keyboard. The smile froze, then vanished. I'm sorry, Miss Wynn. We have nothing that matches your qualifications. She went to another, and another. At the 4th one, a small, kind-looking woman with gray hair motioned her into a back room. Honey, I'm going to tell you something, and you need to listen. the woman said, her voice low. "I don't know who you are or what you got mixed up in, but your name is Poison. I made one call, and I got a call back 2 minutes later. They say you're the wife of Damien Armano. They say you're his property. They say anyone who hires you will have a visit." The woman looked at her with pity. "You're not a person? Sweetie, you're a liability. No one will touch you. You're owned." The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. "I would rather be found by them." Damien's words. "You won't last a day." He hadn't been threatening her. He had been telling her the truth. She was not a prisoner in his penthouse. She was a prisoner in his world. There was no escape. She walked for hours, her money dwindling, the reality of her situation closing in like the smog. She couldn't go back. She couldn't go forward. She was walking back to the motel, her mind a numb, terrified blank, when a black van screeched to a halt beside her, before she could even register the danger. The side door slid open. A hand clamped over her mouth, a strong arm cinched around her waist, and she was dragged inside. The cloying, sweet smell of his cologne hit her. "Hello, Piccola," Luca Moretti whispered in her ear as the van sped away. "He's been turning this city upside down looking for you. It's a pity. I found you first." She woke to the smell of rust and the sluggish, cold damp of the river. She was in a warehouse, her hands tied to a metal chair. Her head throbbed. Luca was sitting opposite her, perched on a wooden crate. He was infuriatingly calm. "Your husband," he said, "is beside himself. He's burning the city down. He has men pulling informants out of every gutter. It's almost romantic." "Let me go," she said, her voice rough. "Oh, no. You are the leverage. You are the key. He's been bleeding his own organization dry, looking for a traitor. He was so busy looking for Vincent, he missed the real snake." Luca smiled. "It was Leo, his father's most trusted driver. Can you imagine? Sold you both out to me for a percentage. Damien found out 2 days ago. I hear the cleanup was extensive. Leo won't be driving anyone again." Rachel's blood ran cold. "I'm just telling you what I saw. She had been right. Damien has been very, very busy for you." "Rachel," Luca continued, standing, beginning to circle her. "That man in the bookstore, the one who frightened you, that was one of Vincent's men, a tracker. Damien had him. Erased, wiped off the map. All for you. He's killed for you. He started a war for you." A heavy metal door at the far end of the warehouse groaned open. A rectangle of gray light. A figure stood there, alone. "Let her go. Luca, Damien." He walked into the dim light, his hands raised, his suit rumpled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His face was a pale, drawn mask of exhaustion and pure, unadulterated fury. Or what? Armano. Luca laughed, drawing a pistol and pressing the barrel to Rachel's temple. She flinched, tears welling. "You brought no one. I have 4 men. You are alone." "I am," Damien agreed, his eyes fixed on Rachel. He ignored the gun, ignored Luca. He just looked at her, his gaze full of a terrible, bottomless apology. "Let her go, and you can have me. This ends. The war, the organization, oh, it's all yours. Just let her walk out that door." Luca stared at him, his mouth open. You're serious? You would trade everything for her?" He laughed, a high, sharp sound. "You really are stupid for her." He took the gun from Rachel's head. I don't want your organization. Damien, I want your head. I want to be the man who ended the Armano line." He raised the gun and fired. The sound was deafening. Rachel screamed. Damien didn't cry out. He simply fell. A bullet slamming into his left leg, shattering the bone. But he didn't just fall. He used the momentum, lunging forward, not at Luca, but at a stack of metal barrels. He shoved the stack, a ton of steel, collapsing it toward Luca as 2 of his hidden guards opened fire. It was not a fight. It was a brutal, desperate explosion. Rachel watched in horror. Damien, his leg ruined, used the overturned barrels as cover. He moved with a speed that was inhuman. One of the guards charged him. Damien's hand shot out, grabbing the man's gun arm, and there was a sickening, wet crack of bone. The man went down. The second guard fired. Damien was already moving, rolling, his face a mask of agonizing pain. He came up under the man's guard, and it was fast, precise and terrible. A chokehold, a desperate struggle, and then silence. The man dropped. It took less than 10 seconds. Luca was on the floor, his arm broken, trapped under a barrel. His gun was 10 feet away. Damien limped, dragging his useless leg, his face ashen, his trousers soaked in blood. He kicked Luca's gun away, his chest heaving. Then he turned to Rachel. The predator vanished. He was just a man, bleeding out, his eyes wide with terror. "Rachel!" He stumbled toward her, fumbling with the ropes. His hands were covered in his own blood, and they were shaking so violently he could barely untie the knots. "He didn't hurt you?" he rasped, his voice raw. "Tell me, did he touch you?" "No," she sobbed. "Damien, you're bleeding. Oh God, you're bleeding so much." The ropes fell away. She launched herself at him, scrambling to her feet just as his good leg gave out. He collapsed. She caught him, her small frame buckling under his dead weight, and they both went down to the dirty floor. "No, no, no," she cried. Pulling his head into her lap, she ripped at her own shirt, trying to make a tourniquet, pressing the fabric against the gaping wound in his leg. The blood was everywhere. It was hot and slick. "Damien, stay with me, help! Somebody help!" she screamed, the tears blurring her vision. He reached up, his bloody, trembling hand cupping her cheek. His eyes were losing focus, the pupils blown wide. "You're safe," he whispered, his breath catching. "That's all that matters. Don't you dare," she sobbed, pressing her hand over his. "Don't you dare die. Do you hear me? Don't you leave me. Not now. I... A faint, pained smile touched his lips. His voice was a thread, barely audible over the sudden, distant wail of sirens. "I'd do it again," he whispered. You're worth every scar." His hands started to fall. She leaned down, her hair tinting them, and she kissed him. It was not a kiss of love, not of passion. It was a kiss of pure, frantic desperation, a kiss of terror. It was a plea, a prayer. It tasted of blood and gunpowder and a terrible, undeniable truth. She'd been right. He didn't know how to love. Not like a normal person. He loved like this, with obsession, with possession, with his life. "Don't leave me," she whispered against his lips, her tears a hot rain on his cold face. "Please." His eyes fluttered, and he went limp in her arms. He did not wake in a hospital. The smell of antiseptic was there, but it was undercut by the faint, familiar scent of old wood and lemon oil. He was in the private medical wing of the Armano estate, a place built for secrets and severe injuries, a place where doctors were flown in and death certificates were never signed. For 3 days, he did not wake. For 3 days, Rachel did not move. She sat in a hard-backed chair beside the bed, her hand clutching his, refusing to let go. Nurses came and went, checking the monitors, the IV drips, the bandages that swathed his leg from thigh to shin. They spoke to her in hushed, respectful tones. She was no longer the assistant. She was the woman who had dragged the heir from a warehouse, her hands bloody, screaming for an ambulance that his men had already called. Isabella Armano had come in, once. She had stood at the foot of the bed, a black lace mantilla covering her hair, and had simply watched Rachel. She watched the way Rachel's gaze never left Damien's face, the way she instinctively tightened her grip on his hand when a monitor beeped too loudly. Isabella had said nothing. She had just turned, nodded once to the guards outside, and left. The gesture was clear. The girl was not to be disturbed. On the 4th morning, he woke. His eyes snapped open, a single, violent intake of breath. The animal terror of the warehouse was still on him. "Luca," he rasped, his hand flying to his side. "Shh, he's gone." His head snapped toward the voice. His wild, unfocused gaze landed on her. Rachel. The terror, the fury, the pain. It all dissolved, replaced by a wave of such profound, agonizing relief that it seemed to hollow him out. He said her name, just a breath. "Rachel." He tried to sit up. Pain, white-hot and blinding, lanced up his leg. He fell back with a groan, his face pale with sweat. "No, no," she whispered, rising, her hands on his shoulders. "Don't move. You're safe. You're at the estate. You lost. You lost a lot of blood. The surgeon said the bone was shattered, but you're alive." He didn't seem to hear her. He was staring at her face, his gaze tracing her features as if she were a ghost. He lifted his hand, the one she wasn't holding, and touched her cheek. His fingers were weak, trembling. He hurt you, he stated. But it was a question, a desperate plea for reassurance. "He didn't hurt me," she said, her tears finally falling, hot and fast. "You got there. You saved me." "No," he whispered, his eyes closing, exhaustion pulling him back under. You. He was gone again. She didn't leave. She slept in the chair, her head on the mattress by his hip. He woke again, this time more slowly. The light in the room was a soft, late-afternoon gold. He was clear-headed, and he was watching her. She felt his gaze and woke, sitting up, her neck stiff. "You look terrible," he rasped. His voice was stronger. "You look worse," she replied, a small, watery smile touching her lips. They were quiet for a long time. The only sound was the steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. "The file," he said finally. The smile vanished from her face. The air in the room grew heavy. "I know," he said, his voice raw with a shame she had never heard. "There is no excuse. Only a reason. I felt like an insect," she whispered, her gaze dropping to her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. "Something you had collected. Something you pinned to a board. I thought the storm. I thought what we had. I thought it was real. But it was just a lie you built." "The method was a lie," he said, his voice gaining that old, hard edge. "The plan to get you, to isolate you, to make you mine. That was a calculation. I will not apologize for it. It was the only way I knew. But the feeling, the why." He pushed himself up on his elbows, his face tight with pain, but his gaze was more intense than any physical touch. "That night of the storm," he said, "when I found you in the hall, you were so small, so terrified, and when I held you, I realized I had it all wrong. I had spent a year building a cage to keep you safe. But I was still on the outside. When I held you, I was in there with you. And I was safe, too." He looked away, at the blank wall. "What I did was wrong, Rachel. It was control. It was possession. It's the only language I was ever taught. But what I feel, that's not what I planned." She looked at him, this powerful, broken man, humbled in a hospital bed. She finally voiced the real truth, the one that had been under all the fear and betrayal. "I was afraid," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Even before the file, I was terrified. I was falling in love with you, and I kept thinking, I am this small, gray person. I'm a stray you brought in, your world, your family, your violence. It was going to swallow me whole. I felt so small, Damien. I didn't know how to be in your world." He was quiet for a long time. He just watched her, his dark eyes memorizing her face, her fear. Then he reached for her hand. His grip was strong. "Then I'll make the world smaller," he said, his voice a low, steady promise. "Just for you. I can't change what I am. I can't stop the war, but I can make you the center of it. I can make it so the only thing that matters, the only thing that can touch me, is you. They won't swallow you. They'll break their teeth on you, because you are mine." It was the most romantic and the most terrifying vow she had ever heard, and she finally understood. He loved her. It was a dark, possessive, all-consuming love, and it was real. The next few weeks were a slow return to life. His leg was in a heavy cast, and he was a terrible patient. He was restless, angry, and hated the weakness. Rachel was the only one who could calm him. She was the only one he would listen to. One morning, she brought him soup. He was sitting up in bed, a stack of files beside him, his face a thundercloud. "I don't want soup," he growled. "Tough," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You need to eat, and I'm not Mrs. Petrova. You can't scare me. She held the spoon up. He stared at her, a silent battle of wills. She didn't flinch. Finally, a slow, grudging smile touched his lips. It transformed his face. He leaned forward and took the soup. "It's good," he admitted. "I know," she said. He ate. She held the bowl, her presence a quiet, steady comfort. He finished and leaned back, his energy spent. He looked at her, his eyes soft. "Your hair," he murmured. It was a mess, pulled back in a clip, strands falling around her face. He reached up, his fingers, so strong, now surprisingly gentle. He tucked a loose strand of her hair behind her ear. His thumb lingered on her cheek. He smiled, a weak, tired, genuine smile. And in that simple, domestic moment, her heart, which had been so broken, finally began to end. 2 months later, Damien could walk with a cane. He would always have a limp, a faint, elegant reminder of the price he had paid. The war was over. Luca Moretti was gone, his organization fractured and absorbed. Vincent had been exiled, sent to run a shipping company in Sicily, a punishment worse than death. The Armano Empire was secure, but there was still a leak. Money was still moving in ways it shouldn't. "It's the same pattern," Rachel said one night. She was in his office, not as a guest, but as a partner. She had found her old rhythm, the numbers making a sense that the world did not. "It's not Petrov, it's not Leo, but it's the same method. Look." Damien leaned over her, his chin brushing her hair. He watched her fingers fly across the private ledgers. She had found it, the last traitor, a cousin, deep in the finance department, who thought he was invisible. The next day, he was gone. That Sunday, they were summoned to the estate. Isabella Armano was waiting for them in the garden. "You have a good eye," the matriarch said, looking at Rachel. She didn't offer a chair. "I was an assistant," Rachel said simply. "You were a queen in hiding," Isabella corrected. "My son, he is all iron. He has no softness. He needed balance. I thought he needed a soldier. He needed a mind." She paused, and a rare, thin smile touched her lips. "He chose well. You have iron in you, too, but you have a heart. Do not let this world break it." It was the only blessing she would ever receive, and it was enough. That afternoon, in that same garden, they were married. There were no guests. There were no contracts, just the two of them, and a very nervous local judge. Damien stood, his cane cast aside, his weight on his good leg. He wore a simple black suit. Rachel wore a simple cream-colored dress she had bought herself. He did not have a prepared vow. He just took her hands. "You are my only truth, Rachel," he said, his voice rough. "In a life of lies, you are the one thing I know is real. I am yours, completely." She looked up at him, this man who had stalked her, bought her, and bled for her. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. "I'm not afraid of the dark. And I'm not afraid of you. I am yours." Her new life began, but it was on her terms. "I want to start a nonprofit," she announced a month later over breakfast, and he didn't even look up from his paper. "Done. How much?" "It's not about the money," she said. "It's for women. Women in coercive workplaces. Women who feel trapped, the way I did. I want to give them a way out." He put the paper down and looked at her. The pride in his eyes was so fierce it made her breath catch. "My lawyers will handle the charter. Use whatever funds you need. Burn it all. It's yours." She called it the Wynn Foundation. She had an office, a small staff, and a purpose. She was not just Mrs. Armano, the mafia wife. She was Rachel Wynn, the woman who had built a lifeline for others. He came home one evening, 6 months after the wedding. She was in the kitchen, cooking. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I have something for you," he murmured. He dropped a set of keys and a deed into her hand. "What is this?" "An apartment," he said, "in the city. A small, beautiful place. It's in your name, only your name. My name is nowhere near it. It has its own accounts, its own security. No one can touch it. Not my family. Not my enemies." He paused, his grip tightening. "Not even me." She turned in his arms, her heart pounding. She understood. "It's a way out," he said, his voice low. "If this world ever becomes too much, if I ever become too much, you have a choice, a real one. You will never be trapped again, Rachel. I swear it." She looked at the keys in her hand, the symbol of her freedom, the proof that he had finally, truly understood her. A year ago, she would have taken those keys and run. She closed her hand around them, her fingers tight. Then she smiled, a slow, sure smile. She reached up and put her arms around his neck, pulling him down to her. "I don't want out," she whispered against his lips. "I want in." "All the way in." She kissed him, and it was not a kiss of desperation or fear. It was a kiss of choice, a kiss of strength. He held her, his hands splayed on her back, lifting her against him, and in that moment, in their kitchen, they were just a husband and a wife. That night, they stood on the penthouse balcony. The city was a galaxy of lights at their feet. It was no longer a cage. It was just a view. He came up behind her, just as he had in the kitchen, wrapping his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He was solid, warm, and real. He nuzzled her neck, his lips brushing the sensitive skin below her ear. "It's beautiful," she whispered, looking at the endless, glittering city. "I didn't save you, Rachel," he whispered, his voice a low rumble against her back. "You saved me." She turned in his arms, her hands coming up to cup his face, his faint, rugged stubble scraping her palms. She looked into his dark, intense eyes, the eyes that had watched her, judged her, and finally, adored her. "You're both right," she said. She pulled him down and they kissed. It was slow, and it was real, and it was full of a promise that was finally, truly, theirs. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We hope you enjoyed this journey with Rachel and Damien. Where in the world are you listening from? We would love to know. Please drop a comment and tell us. If you loved this story, please be sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories so you never miss a new chapter. Let us know what you thought of the story. Your feedback means everything to us.